and to the entire state of Kansas. Rock chalk, Jayhawk. Well done, KU. Thank you, Mr. President.
From Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to discuss the small business tax bill currently before the Senate, one of which I hope we have an opportunity to debate openly and fairly and allow amendments, but I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen, which is frustrating because the American people deserve better. When we allow the process to work, we actually have everybody have their say in the process, and as a result of that, we ultimately get a good bill, and I'm hopeful we can do the same in this one. And it's good we are finally working on jobs, but I believe that we should be working in a more bipartisan way, as we did with the insider trading bill, as we did with crowdfunding, as we've done with the Arlington Cemetery bill, the 3% withholding, and many other bills. We need to work on a bill where all members are offered an opportunity to have their votes on job-creating ideas. I don't think one party has the monopoly on how to create jobs in this country. I think we could actually, get together in a room and just hammer it out, try to work to help protect the middle class and everybody in America who wants to get out and work. And we have worked together, as I said, and a whole host of bills. I forgot the Hire a Hero tax credit, too, which is clearly a jobs bill. Worked with Senator Bennett and Merkley on those. Very important piece of legislation. With that type of success, as I said, I don't understand why we don't try that more often. The new medical device tax imposed by the federal health care law is one more example of a policy that we all know is bad for jobs and, in fact, bad for our economy. The House has already voted to repeal this job-killing tax, but I'm disappointed to say that the Senate has not taken the time to work to repeal it in a truly bipartisan manner. For those of you who don't know what the medical device tax is, or why should you even care? Well, in Massachusetts, we have over 400 medical device companies in our state, employing tens of thousands of people. This 2.3% tax on medical device sales will cost our economy thousands of jobs and limit Americans' access to the most groundbreaking, state-of-the-art medical devices. For example, Covidien, a medical device company with 2,000 employees in my home state, has estimated that taxable medical devices represent approximately 30 to 40% of the total net sales in 2011. What that means in plain language is that tax will cost Covidien between $80 and $107 million annually. So where's that money going to come from? Is it R&D? Is it expansion? Is it hiring or expanding their workforce? Over the last 5 years, Covidien has more than doubled its R&D investment and launched more than 100 new products. One of those products is a device that restores blood flow to the brain in patients suffering from stroke by mechanically removing blood clots from blocked vessels. I mean, obviously a very important piece of, very important device that would actually help save people's lives and save costs. Another product provides the first safe and effective treatment for large or giant wide-neck brain aneurysms available on the market. But losing $80 to $107 million in revenue each year is going to put Covidien's continuing growth in very, very real jeopardy. Another medical device company, Stryker Corporation, said late last year that they would begin cutting 5% of their workforce in response to the tax. That's 1,000 jobs gone as a result of this tax. Stryker expects the device tax to cost them $130 to $150 million in the first year alone. These are just two examples. And as I said, in Massachusetts, we have over 400 medical device companies. The Massachusetts medical device industry, as I referenced earlier, employs nearly 25,000 workers in Massachusetts and contributes over $4 billion to our economy. Massachusetts alone is expected to lose over 2,600 jobs. And as a result of this tax, as a direct result of this tax, around 10% of our entire medical device manufacturing workforce will be affected. The bottom line is that we just can't have that kind of job loss in a sector of our economy that's still struggling. Yesterday, I, along with others, introduced an amendment to repeal this job-killing medical device tax, a tax which will, in fact, drive up the cost of care for patients and make our workers and our companies less competitive. Some say it's time to move on from the health care bill to work on jobs legislation. Well, with all due respect, working on job growth means repealing the health care bill, and it's 18 new job-destroying taxes, along, obviously, with the $500 billion in Medicare cuts. A lot of these things haven't clicked in, and the American public isn't quite aware that they are soon going to be affected by 18 new taxes associated with the federal health care bill and a $500 billion in Medicare cuts. It's time to get rid of the medical device tax before it does even more damage, not only to Massachusetts, but other states that have a large medical device industry. And I urge my colleagues to get behind this effort in a truly bipartisan, bicameral manner. And so I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President, and has the time expired?
Senator from Utah.
Should we go to the bill, or?
Senator, the Senate is considering a motion or a bill proceed on S-3369.
Okay. Mr. President? Mr. President?
Senator from Utah, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I find it ironic that we are debating a bill called the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act when that bill does absolutely nothing to address the death tax, one of the biggest threats to our small businesses in our country. Again, while Republicans are being accused of not wanting to move legislation to help grow the economy and develop jobs, it was interesting to read this morning that my Democratic friends still do not have any agreement among themselves on how to proceed on a number of tax issues, including the death tax. They need to get moving. They need to get moving over there. Next year, unless Congress does something, the death tax will come roaring back at a much higher rate of 55% and a much lower exemption amount of $1 million next year. Though those who promote the death tax characterize it as impacting only Daddy Warbucks, the monopoly man and Montgomery Burns, the data do not bear this cartoonish characterization out. The death tax does not just hit those in higher income tax brackets. It has an effect well beyond small business owners, adversely impacting middle-class jobs and wages. Call it what you will, the estate tax or the death tax. But in the end, it is a tax that is anti-small business and anti-job creation and anti-wage increase. We are in the midst of another Senate floor show pursuing legislation that will give the President and his allies campaign talking points, but will do nothing, absolutely nothing, to spur economic growth and job creation. Meanwhile, the Senate has failed to take action on estate tax reform. This is beyond irresponsible. I've been a long-time proponent of repealing the death tax. Not only is it double taxation and a deterrent to savings, but it also sucks up capital in the marketplace. To be clear, this is capital that could be used to hire more workers or expand small businesses or any business for that matter. This is a basic economic concept that seems lost on our current president, President Obama. During last year's deficit reduction talks, President Obama argued on behalf of tax increases, saying, quote, "I do not want and I will not accept a deal in which I am asked to do nothing. In fact, I'm able to keep hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional income that I don't need." Income that I don't need? This is a point that could only be made by a person with a very loose understanding of how businesses and entrepreneurs operate. The President seems to think that this so-called excess income does no good. In fact, however, it will be invested, or it would be invested in new business ventures, new hires, and better wages. If these entrepreneurs with all of this excess income did nothing but put that money into a savings account, it would benefit individuals looking to buy a house, buy a car, or start their own business. But the President doesn't seem to grasp this. And so it is no surprise that he and his Democratic allies have done nothing to address this job-killing death tax increase looming on the horizon. The President claims that he is interested in job creation. He certainly should be after last month's anemic jobs report. Well, he need look no further than death tax repeal. I know that his liberal base might not appreciate it, but the rest of the country, which is less interested in class warfare, taking talking points, and more interested in getting the economy moving again, would embrace it. The death tax adds inefficiency to our economy. It is what economists refer to as deadweight loss. In other words, it creates another burden on our free market system that prevents the full potential of economic growth. For instance, many small businesses have to purchase insurance in order to prepare for paying the death tax, so they do not end up having to sell the business just to pay the death tax. This added cost is embedded into the cost of goods when sold. In other words, American consumers, American workers, or Americans looking for work are those who will ultimately have to pay the death tax. Consider also that heirs are often forced to sell an asset of the business or the business itself in order to meet this arbitrary tax due date. These assets are likely generating revenue and could be a vital part of the business, but because the tax man cometh, small businesses are forced to sell these assets to pay the death tax. We ought to repeal the death tax, plain and simple. We actually don't get that much revenue from the death tax to justify its existence, and it's a pain in the neck from the beginning. In 2010, the death tax was temporarily repealed, but in a few months the law will take a sharp turn for the worse. Back in 2010, Senators Kyle and Lincoln offered a compromise that gained bipartisan support, which eventually became law. Under Title III of the Tax Relief Act, a law signed by President Obama, the death tax and the gift tax are unified with a $5 million exemption amount and a tax rate of 35%. Under current law, however, in 2013, we will once again have a 55% estate tax due within 9 months of death, and in some cases the tax will reach 60%. The exemption amount could be as low as $1 million. That just is not right. How does it benefit an economy, or our economy, to have small businesses and farmers wondering whether they have to sell their business or literally sell the farm to pay for an uncertain amount of taxes? It creates an accounting and a financial nightmare. The estate tax is not about making the tax code more progressive. The estate tax is not about more redistribution. It is really not about deficit reduction. It is class warfare, and while it might stir up some votes, it has an outsized and detrimental impact on our economy. Mr. President, many do not realize the enormous impact the death tax has on rural America. I'm not only talking about farmers and ranchers, I'm also talking about small family-owned businesses that generate economic growth in smaller towns and even larger towns. If we do not address the death tax, some businesses with assets over $1 million could be susceptible to the death tax. I know for a small business that $1 million in assets is a pretty low threshold. That is why I care about this death tax debate, because of real people, real Utahns and real communities that will be upended if this tax increase is allowed to go into effect. But when you hear about the number of individuals impacted by the death tax, that statistic actually understates the sweep of this intrusion by the federal government. The estate tax return is filed by the representative of the deceased. That return does not take into account the dead person's family, employees, or neighbors. All of those folks are affected if the death tax burdens that particular family business or farm. There seems to be a strategy by the Democratic leadership to drag its feet in coming up with a resolution to this impending problem. What they fail to realize is that this strategy is only adding to the cloud of uncertainty, economic uncertainty over our country and over our economy. Will Congress keep the rates and exemption amounts the same? Will Congress increase them? What do I need to do as a small business owner to better prepare my business from withstanding a tax increase? These are the types of questions that more and more small business owners and farmers are construing to act and continuing to act. asked. And the uncertainty these questions generate is holding back investment, job creation, and wage growth. Yet policies to promote economic growth have unfortunately taken a backseat to presidential talking points that campaign advisors think will generate votes. Attack the rich. Promise more spending. As a candidate, President Obama promised in 2008 that Washington needed to be spreading the wealth around. That is one promise the President has kept. In spite of an economy that demands a focus on job creation, the President and his liberal allies have spent the last year coming up with even more intensive redistributionist schemes. Recently, the Joint Committee on Taxation released an estimate on how many more taxable estates, farming taxable estates, and small business taxable estates would be affected by the increase in the death tax over the next 10 years. The numbers are truly astonishing. If Congress does not act, we will see more than a 1,000% increase in the number of taxable estates, a 2,300% increase in the number of farming taxable estates, and a 1,000% increase in the number of small business taxable estates. The reach of the death tax is growing, and it is going to hit not just the so-called rich, but current employees, and for that matter, entire communities. Let's take a look at the death tax of 2013. It arrives in a little over 7 months, by the way. Under current law, 46,760 estates will be taxable. 46,700 estates will be taxable. If we extend the Lincoln-Kyle Compromise, 3,600 estates would be taxable. Now, let me refer to the Joint Committee on Taxation estate tax data chart. It's the second column on there. Okay. As you can see, the filers are 97,300. The taxable estates are 46,700. Farming taxable estates are 2,100. And small business taxable estates are 2,000. Really, when you think about it, under current law, the path seems to be slow walking on means more than 10 times the number of estates will be hit by the tax. The Lincoln-Kyle Compromise means only the top 10%, the wealthiest estates, would be hit by the death tax. If you project the 8 years of current law out over 10 years, you will find that roughly 570,000 estates will be taxable over that period. Under the Lincoln-Kyle Compromise, which is the current estate tax regime, roughly 41,000 estates would be taxable over that period. 570,000 estates under the law that many Democrats would want, where only 41,000 states would be taxable under the Kyle-Lincoln Compromise, or Lincoln-Kyle Compromise. Now, taxable estates, let's go to that on this chart. Under the years, it would be the third one up from the bottom. Under the, I might just say, in a recent interview with the Associated Press, Secretary of Agriculture Kathleen Merrigan described an epidemic of sorts that is hitting our farmlands across the United States. She did not talk about rising fuel prices or droughts. Instead, Secretary Merrigan discussed how our country's farmers and ranchers are getting older and fewer young people who are taking their place. I've heard time and time again that the death tax is the #1 reason family farms and businesses fail to pass down to the next generation. If Congress does not act soon, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that another 2,000 farming estates will be hit by the death tax next year. Keep in mind, farmers sometimes carry debt. That would reduce the value of the farm. But on the other hand, farmers have other farm-related assets like combines and other equipment that are not included in the figures I cited. This data here shows that the failure to address the estate tax cliff will undermine many, many family farms. For those folks who are working this land, this is an unwelcome uncertainty, and as I indicated earlier, the tax is an impediment to passing on the family business, in this case, the family farm. A much higher death tax, apparently supported by many members on the other side, will undermine many family farms and small businesses. Yet these family farms and small businesses form the economic backbone of their communities. Do we really want to send the signal that those who work hard, save, and want to pass something on to their families exist solely to fund bloated federal programs? Why work hard? Why save? Why not work less? Instead, if the president is just going to spread your wealth around, it might just be easier to go into debt and live beyond your means. There is something fundamentally unjust about the estate tax. Contrary to the claims of the president and his most liberal supporters, a person's wealth is the result of his labor, his or her labor. When you build a business, you put your sweat and ingenuity into it. And to then be punished for this, to have it taken away at the moment of death by the federal government, is an assault on personal liberty and freedom. John Locke understood this, the great philosopher. America's founding fathers understood this, and they would no doubt be appalled to know that behind the Grim Reaper now stands an IRS agent waiting to collect and deliver the government share. But today's so-called liberals have abandoned this classical liberal philosophy, the philosophy of natural rights and liberties that our nation was founded upon, in favor of a redistributionist philosophy that undermines rights and undermines our economy. Time is running out. We cannot continue this cycle of passing temporary tax relief and then waiting until the very last minute to decide what to do next. We owe it to family farms and small businesses to figure out a way to pass a permanent solution so that each year businesses are not left wondering whether or not they will have to shut their doors in order to pay the death tax. Also, for those who love to raise taxes on small businesses, keep in mind these small businesses pay a lot of income tax each year into the Treasury's coffers. Do we really want to kill the goose that is laying the golden eggs? Mr. President, if we are serious about providing true tax relief that will help small businesses grow, we can sit here and debate whether a Band-Aid will be the cure to our ailing economy, or we can begin the debate over how to prevent historic tax increases from hammering our small businesses and farms. I urge my friends in the Democratic leadership to put the death tax on the Senate's radar screen. And I would suggest the absence of the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am reminded today of the old saying that we campaign in poetry, but we govern in prose. We are in the midst of a campaign season when we hear a lot of rhetoric, perhaps posing as poetry, but we have an obligation to govern, and I rise today in support of S. 233-7, which is most certainly simple, straightforward prose in dedication to the art of government. It is the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act. It is about as simple and straightforward as possibly it could be. It has two compelling, concise concepts. First is a tax credit of 10% on new payroll. It can be either new hiring or increased wages in 2012 as compared to 2011, and it is capped at $500,000. Pretty simple, straightforward, prose, in aid of jobs, in aid of employment. It also extends for 1 year the 100% bonus depreciation allowance to stimulate economic investment, again, to create jobs. Very simple and straightforward extension of the accelerated depreciation that boosts gross domestic products and will benefit 2 million businesses. It's estimated 2 million businesses, most of them small businesses, across the United States. In fact, this measure is targeted, very specifically targeted and aimed at small businesses creating jobs. They are the backbone of our economy. They are the source of the majority of new jobs. It economizes very prudently and practically the aid that is designed to boost new jobs as well as overall output in our economy. And it's supported by a broad consensus of economists, ranging from Alan Blinder, who's endorsed this idea as a job creator, saying that, quote, the basic idea is to offer firms that boost their payrolls a tax break. As one concrete example, companies might be offered a tax credit equal to 10% of the increase in their wage bills. No increase, no reward. That's the concept, end of quote. That is the concept. No increase, no reward. But the reward and the incentive are a powerful potential driving force to aid small businesses in increasing the numbers of jobs they provide. I want to thank Leader Harry Reid for this very targeted and profoundly meaningful proposal. But when I think about the impact of this legislation, I don't think of the folks who are gathered in this chamber. I think of people in Connecticut, 13,000 people in Connecticut who will have jobs if we move forward on this bill. I think of a man named Hector Hernandez. I met Hector at a jobs fair that I hosted in East Hartford this past September. After 25 years of working for the same company, as they say, working hard and playing by the rules, Hector lost his job. And he's willing to do most anything to find a new job. But he can't find one. There are simply no jobs for Hector. And this measure will help to provide him one. At that same jobs fair, I met Ty Wagner. Ty took a very smart path. He decided he was going to get all the education that could possibly be accessible to him. He got a technical degree from a top university. He wanted to work in the state. When he graduated, his dream job really was to give back, to provide public service. He hasn't been able to find any job, let alone his dream job. And he is every bit as lost as Hector Hernandez. And that situation faced by Hector and Ty is only one aspect of the crisis in America's job market. I think of Jody Lazarus, who moved to Stanford 5 years ago in search of economic opportunity. She put her 2 kids in local schools, signed up for college classes, started to get her finances in order, and today she makes barely enough to feed her family, and she receives no benefits. She's been looking for a job that will pay her more and give her more security, but in this economy, her efforts have come to nothing. And every week, she hopes and prays that this week's income will be enough to provide food this week for her family. People like Jody and Hector and Ty deserve better. As I travel across Connecticut, I hear often that there are jobs and employers can't find people with the skills to fill them, and we need to provide those skills to develop our workforce, to make sure that education and training are available so that people have skills to fill the jobs that exist. But Washington can do more for them in this kind of targeted, practical approach. Not Republican or Democrat, not conservative or progressive. It simply provides the tools that small businesses need. A 10% payroll tax cut, accelerated depreciation, simple, straightforward prose, not poetry, prose that will put people back to work in Connecticut and around the country. I urge that my colleagues come together as the American people want us to do, desperately are seeking for us to do, and to govern in prose that makes a practical difference in their lives. A tool for small business so that, not as a panacea, but as a practical aid, small businesses can put people back to work across the state of Connecticut and across the country. I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
The senator from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. President, first let me thank my colleague from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, for his comments. I must tell you, I was listening to you account to the people in Connecticut, the individuals who are struggling in this economy. I can tell you that we have the same exact circumstances happening in Maryland. This past weekend, I was with some small business owners who were telling me their plans for opening up a new restaurant and opening up a new gasoline station, and telling me the struggles that they're having in getting financing. There are community banks that have money, but they can't make the loans because of the way that the new rating system is, and it's very difficult to get the capital to make the type of expansions that you need today to start a new business. In my state of Maryland, the high-tech and the cybersecurity areas where we have small companies that are starting up to help our country answer the problems of cybersecurity, help our country develop the type of biotech discoveries that will make our healthcare system more cost-effective. They're having a very difficult time today putting together the capital in order to be able to move forward with job creation. You and I know that 60% of our job creation will come from small businesses. We also know that innovation is more likely to come from small companies that find ways to do things more cost-effectively. And today, in this economy, it is a challenge for small business owners to be able to put together the business financing to be able to create the jobs that we need for our economy. You also understand that if we're going to balance our budget, if we're going to be able to move forward, we have to have more people working in this country. A lot of people are looking for jobs and can't find jobs. We want more people working to fuel our economy, and also, by the way, they also pay taxes and help us bring our budget into balance. So I couldn't agree with you more that we need to get Democrats and Republicans working together. Here we have a bill on the floor that helps small businesses. let's not filibuster this bill. Let us at least bring it up for an up or down vote. I thought we thought in democracy a majority rules. Let's bring it up. Let's have a vote. Let's keep it to the small business issues. We all talk about our support for small businesses. Let's keep it to the issue before us, to create jobs, help small businesses to do that. The underlining bill, and I thank Senator Reid for the underlining bill, it says to small businesses that if you add to our economy, if you create more jobs, if you increase your payroll, then we have a tax help for you to do that. And I must tell you, Mr. President, I think this is exactly what we need. I mean, we know that businesses can't get all the financing they need. They need some help in order to be able to put together the new job opportunities. This bill provides that with a 10% credit on the cost of a new hire. That gives the incentive for a small business owner. Might be the difference between setting up that new restaurant or moving forward to add that employee that will not only help our economy, but will help that company discover the way in which we can deal with the cyber threats to this country. So it helps our country, it creates the jobs, and this underlining bill should be discussed on the floor of the Senate without filibusters that deny us that chance to talk about the issue. I also want to thank Senator Landrieu. Senator Landrieu has put forward a series of amendments, the chair of our Small Business Committee, and I'm proud to have worked with her on the amendment that she has brought forward that adds some additional provisions that are extremely important. I know in the underlining bill and working with Senator Landrieu, we have also the expensing provision. That's an important provision. As I'm sure the senator from Connecticut understands, that provision allows a business owner to go out and make a capital investment, buy a piece of equipment. And rather than having to write it off over 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, they can write it off immediately and get the ability to buy that piece of equipment, to grow their business, and to be able to then write the cost of that off. It's just a timing issue for the business person, but it's the difference between making the investment or not making the investment, creating a job or not creating the job. And by the way, by buying that piece of equipment, that business owner is also helping another business owner who's selling that piece of equipment to get our economy back moving again. It's that type of common sense provisions that have always enjoyed broad bipartisan support in the Senate. Always. These are provisions that we've had Democrats and Republicans working together on. We need to do that today. Let's move on with this bill. You know, we've had it on the floor now a couple days. Let's move on, start voting, but don't filibuster. Let us vote on relevant amendments. Can't we just stick with the small business issues and vote on that in order to help our economy grow? I'm also pleased about another provision that's in the Landrieu amendment and the underlining bill now that we could have a chance to vote on that increases the surety bond limits for small businesses. This was passed by the Senate and incorporated in law in February of 2009. I was proud to be the sponsor of this amendment that increased the surety bond limits from $2 million to $5 million. The reason why this becomes important is that for a small business owner to be able to get a government contract over $100,000, they need to have a surety bond. Now, in order to get that surety bond, the small business owner has to take some of their, usually some of their security, some of their assets and pledge it for the surety bond rather than using it for the credit of the company, which is really a catch-22 situation. Increasing the limits from $2 million to $5 million frees up some of that ability, because the government comes in, Small Business Administration comes in and helps them with that surety bond. So if you're a construction contractor trying to get a federal contract, the difference between $2 million and $5 million is a huge difference in the type of contracts that you can compete for. And it's interesting that when we looked at it, we had projected that it would generate about $147 million in additional bonding activity for the projects over $2 million. And we found that, in fact, it increased activity by $360 million. So the need was there. It generated strong activity. Democrats and Republicans supported it. I was proud to have the support of Senator Landrieu and Senator Snowe. This is not a controversial issue. Well, the only way we're going to get that increase, that expired in 2010. It's no longer part of the law. We're back to the $2 million. So small business owners are at a disadvantage. We just haven't had a chance to extend that. It's not controversial. It brings money into the economy. It's not scored. So we need to be able to get that done. If we can't get to this bill, I don't know when we get that increase in the surety bond limit. So it's another reason I just urge my colleagues to let us vote on this bill to help small businesses in our community. It has always enjoyed bipartisan support. So here's what we're asking. My colleagues, we all talk about we want to create more jobs. We all talk about supporting small businesses because we know small businesses are the growth engine of America. We all know that small businesses create more of the new patents, more of the new innovations per employee than the larger companies do. Well, let's put our action where our words are. And we could do that today by allowing us to move forward to consider amendments on the Reid bill that's before us, the Landrieu amendments. Let's move forward with that bill. Let's take up relevant amendments that deal with small business issues. Let's vote them up or down by a majority vote of the United States Senate. And then I'm sure at the end of the day, when we put that bill up for final passage, it will enjoy broad support by the members of this body. And it gives, I think, the American people confidence that we indeed are focused on job creation for America. So I urge my colleagues to let's move forward on this bill. Let's take up the Landrieu amendments, take up the underlying bill, and let's do something that can help small businesses, help job growth, help our economy, and restore confidence to the American people that we are indeed dealing with the agenda that they want us to do, moving our country forward, moving our economy forward by creating more jobs in our economy. And with that, again, I want to thank my friend from Connecticut, thank the presiding officer, and I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Ask that the quorum call be suspended.
The senator from North Dakota is recognized.
Ask that the quorum call be
Without
suspended.
objection, so ordered. Senator is recognized.
I rise today to speak on the need for pro-growth tax reform. Recently, President Obama, in fact on Monday, in a speech proposed a plan to raise tax rates rather than continuing the current tax rates. That means raising taxes on individuals and small businesses. That means raising the capital gains tax on investment. So not only the income tax, but also the capital gains tax, small businesses, individuals, capital gains tax on investment. It also means raising the death tax on American families, the estate tax as well. Now, he made that proposal even though he has repeatedly said that we cannot raise taxes in a recession. So he's made that statement repeatedly in recent years that we cannot raise taxes in a recession because it would hurt the economy and raising taxes would hurt job creation. So here we are. On Monday, he proposes that we raise the tax rates. And we're at a time where we have 8.2% unemployment. In fact, we've had 8%, we've been over 8% employment for 41 straight months. We have 13 million people unemployed that we want to get back to work, and we have another 10 million that are underemployed. So on the order of 23 million people that are either unemployed or underemployed. Since this administration has taken office, middle-class income has declined from approximately $55,000 to about $50,000. The number of people on food stamps has grown from 32 million recipients to 46 million recipients. Home values have dropped from an average of about $169,000 to an average of about $148,000. In the area of economic growth, GDP growth is the weakest of any recovery post-World War II. The last quarter reported was about a 1.9% increase over the prior quarter. In the area of job creation, the report for June, as far as the number of jobs gained in the month, came out last week. So in June, we gained about 80,000 jobs. That is far short of the 150,000 jobs that we need to grow just to each month, just to keep up with population growth. And so now the President says that the solution is to raise taxes on our job creator. This week after the President's speech, as I said, he gave that speech on Monday, I received a letter from a small business owner in my home state of North Dakota. Now, I know this individual. In fact, he has a hardware store in Bismarck, North Dakota, and I've often gone there for items that I need when I'm working on my home. In fact, last year we had terrible flooding throughout the state of North Dakota and Minot and other communities. We had flooding in Bismarck-Mandan. My home was along the Missouri River. It was one of them that was in the way of the flood. So I often went over to this hardware store to get needed items. He runs a good business, good small business, and is very helpful. But he sent me this letter after the President's speech on Monday, and I'd just like to read it. It's short, and I'd like to take a minute and read it. Senator Hoeven, the President's recent comments on raising taxes on high-income earners concerns me greatly. Perhaps he just doesn't understand that for people like me who own a business, the bulk of those earnings actually go to the bank payments for what I borrowed to be here. I'm actually in danger of being taxed to a point of no living wage for myself. The taxes and bank payments come first. Out of an income that classifies me as rich, I actually take $40,000 home to my family. How much more do they want? John, you've shopped in my store. You've seen how we've grown. And you know people like me would use every available dime to grow more. This President's program not only limits my company's potential to grow, but they destroy any incentive to work and hire more people. I just don't know if he doesn't understand what he's doing or just doesn't care. Please, Senator Hoeven, share with your partners in the Senate how critical an issue this is for small business owners like me. Oh, and thanks for shopping at Ace when you're home in Bismarck. It's from Jeff Hinz. He has the Kirkwood Ace hardware store, as I mentioned. Well, I think Jeff sums it up very well, better than I could. Jeff represents millions of small businesses across this country that are the very backbone of our economy. They hire the people, they pay the wages, they pay the taxes, and they fuel the growth and the dynamism of our economy. In short, they make our economy go. Small business in this country makes our economy go. Yet the President's proposal would raise taxes on about 1 million business owners, hurting their ability to grow our economy, and you know what? Hurting our ability to get those 13 million unemployed people back to work. That's not the way to go. Very clearly, that is not the way to go. This administration's policies are making it worse. But the President says everyone needs to pay their fair share. How many times have you heard him say that? Everyone needs to pay their fair share. Well, of course, everyone needs to pay their fair share. But the way to do it is with pro-growth tax reform and closing loopholes, not by raising taxes on some people, some businesses, and not others. So that's what we've proposed. That's exactly what we've proposed. We've proposed pro-growth tax reform and closing loopholes. Let's extend the current tax rates for 1 year and set up a process to pass pro-growth tax reform that lowers rates, that closes loopholes, that's fairer, that's simpler, and that will generate the revenue to reduce our debt and deficit along with savings, along with spending less, controlling government spending, but that will generate the economic growth to drive revenue, not higher taxes. The reality is that is the only way to get on top of our debt and deficit and to get people back to work. We need economic growth to reduce the debt and deficit, along with more savings at the federal level, controlling spending, and we need economic growth to get people working again. And that's why we've put forward our approach. Simple approach. Simple approach. Extend the current tax rates for another year and set up a process for comprehensive pro-growth tax reform. That's the right approach. For the decade of 2000 to 2010, I served as governor of a state. That's the approach we took. Look at the results in our state. Look at the results in our state of North Dakota. Look at the results in states like Indiana, where that approach has been taken. It works at the state level. It will work at the federal level. And we need to do it. I call on President Obama, as well as my colleagues, to engage in this vital effort now for the good of the American people. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senior senator from Arizona is recognized.
I reluctantly request unanimous consent.